The mop bucket hit the tile floor with a metallic clang that echoed through the empty stairwell, and Elena Kovac didn't stop to think about what she was doing. Couldn't afford to think, because the boy curled against the wall was bleeding and the 4 teenagers surrounding him were laughing. One of them, tall with a Letterman jacket, drew his foot back for another kick. Elena's body moved before her brain caught up, the metal bucket swinging through the air like a medieval weapon, connecting with the boy's shoulder with a crack that satisfied something primal in her chest. "Get away from him." Her voice came out raw, louder than she'd spoken in months. The teenagers turned, their faces registering shock, then contempt. They saw what everyone saw, a woman in a janitor's uniform, 29 years old but looking older, hair pulled back in a severe bun, cleaning supplies clutched in trembling hands. Nobody important. Nobody who mattered. The ringleader took a step toward her, and Elena saw the calculation in his eyes. She was alone. The stairwell was isolated. The south wing of Riverside Preparatory Academy emptied by 3:30, and it was nearly 4 now, the autumn light slanting through the high windows in dusty beams. Behind him, the child, he couldn't be more than 8, made a sound like a wounded animal, hands pressed over his ears, rocking violently. Blood streamed from his nose, staining his expensive white shirt. His eyes were squeezed shut, and he was humming, a desperate monotone that cut through Elena like glass. "Mind your own business, cleaning lady," the teenager said, but his voice wavered. His friends shifted, uncertain. Elena had the bucket raised like a club, and something in her face must have looked wild, unhinged, because they hesitated. That hesitation saved them all. Elena didn't lower the bucket. She moved forward instead, positioning herself between the boy and his tormentors, her body a shield. "Touch him again, and I'll break your arm." The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere she'd buried 2 years ago when her husband died and the medical bills started arriving like death sentences. She'd learned to be invisible, to survive by not being seen. But this she couldn't ignore. The boy behind her whimpered and the sound cracked something in her chest. Her younger brother had made sounds like that, in the foster home, before he died, before she'd been too young and powerless to save him. She wasn't powerless now. The teenager's jaw clenched. He was maybe 17, athletic, used to getting his way. His friends called him Tyler. He took another step forward and Elena swung the bucket again, not connecting but close enough that he jerked back. "I said get out." For a long moment, the stairwell held its breath. Then footsteps echoed from the floor above, a teacher maybe, or security. Tyler spat on the floor near Elena's feet. "Freak lover," he muttered, but he was already backing. Down away, his friends following. They disappeared through the stairwell door, their laughter fading, and Elena was left with the child and the sound of his labored breathing. She dropped the bucket. Her hands were shaking so hard she had to press them against her thighs. The boy was still rocking, still humming, blood dripping onto the tile she'd mopped just that morning. Elena knelt slowly, making herself small, non-threatening. She'd learned about autism in the mandatory training Riverside required, knew about sensory overload, about the importance of predictability and calm. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey, sweetheart, they're gone. You're safe now." The boy didn't respond. His humming intensified, a self-soothing mechanism, and Elena recognized the signs of a meltdown. She didn't touch him, knew better than to invade his space without permission. But she stayed close, her presence steady. "My name is Elena. I work here. I clean the classrooms. I'm not going to hurt you." Minutes passed. 5, 10. The boy's rocking slowed incrementally, his humming quieting to a whisper. Elena kept talking, her voice low and rhythmic, telling him about the birds she'd seen that morning, about the way the leaves were changing colors, about nothing and everything. Her knees ached against the hard floor. Her ribs throbbed where one of the boys had landed a glancing punch before she'd gotten the bucket up. She ignored the pain. Finally, the boy's hands lowered from his ears. His eyes opened, dark brown, huge in his pale face, filled with a terror that made Elena's throat tight. He looked at her, really looked, and Elena saw the moment he registered that she was safe. His small body sagged, exhaustion replacing fear. "You're okay," Elena murmured. "I've got you. I won't let anyone hurt you." The boy's lips moved. No sound came out, but Elena could read the word. Mama. Her heart shattered. "Let's get you cleaned up, okay? Can I help you?" He nodded, a tiny movement, and when Elena carefully reached out her hand, he took it. His fingers were sticky with blood, small and cold in her palm. Elena helped him stand, noting the way he avoided the cracks in the tile, the way he kept his gaze fixed on the floor. Autism, definitely, probably nonverbal based on the humming instead of words. The expensive clothes suggested wealthy parents. The fact that he was here, alone, being beaten, suggested something had gone terribly wrong. She led him toward the nurse's office, moving slowly, matching his pace. He gripped her hand like a lifeline, and Elena felt the weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders like a familiar coat. She'd spent 29 years learning to mind her own business, to keep her head down and survive in a city that chewed up people like her and spit them out without a second thought. But that scream, that desperate, dying sound the boy had made, had shattered every survival instinct she'd ever developed. The nurse's office was empty, the nurse having left at 3. Elena used her master key to unlock the door, guiding the boy inside. He sat on the examination table without prompting, his legs dangling, and Elena gathered supplies: gauze, antiseptic, ice pack. Her hands were steadier now, muscle memory from caring for her husband taking over. She'd learned to clean wounds, to comfort, to be strong when everything inside her was breaking. "This might sting a little," she warned before touching the antiseptic to his nose. The boy flinched but didn't pull away. Elena worked carefully, gently, cleaning the blood from his face and hands. His shirt was ruined, but she found a Riverside hoodie in the lost and found bin and helped him into it. He let her, docile now, his eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that suggested he was cataloging everything. Her face, her voice, her touch. When she was done, Elena sat beside him, not too close. "Do you have a phone? Can you tell me your name? I need to call your parents." The boy shook his head. His hands moved, signing something Elena didn't understand. She cursed herself for never learning ASL, for all the things she didn't know that might help this child. "Okay, that's okay. We'll figure it out." She pulled out her own phone, a cheap prepaid model, the only thing she could afford, and was about to call the main office when the boy's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. His eyes were wide, panicked, and he shook his head violently. Elena paused, understanding dawning. He didn't want her to call. He was afraid. "Sweetheart, I have to get you home. Your parents must be worried sick." The boy's grip tightened. He pointed at her, then at himself, then wrapped his arms around his own chest. Elena's throat closed. He wanted her to stay with him. He trusted her, this stranger who'd hit a teenager with a mop bucket, more than he trusted whoever was supposed to pick him up. What kind of life did this child have? Before Elena could decide what to do, the sound of engines roared outside. Multiple engines, expensive and powerful. The boy's entire body went rigid. Elena moved to the window, pulling back the curtain, and her blood turned to ice. 6 black SUVs were pulling into the parking lot, moving with military precision. They formed a semicircle near the entrance, and men in dark suits emerged. 12 of them, maybe more, all wearing the same expression of controlled violence. They moved like soldiers, like predators, and Elena's survival instincts screamed at her to run. Then the driver's door of the lead SUV opened, and a man stepped out. Elena had seen dangerous men before. She'd grown up in a neighborhood where violence was currency, where the wrong look could get you killed. But this man, This man was different. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his expensive suit like it had been tailored to his exact measurements. His dark hair was shot through with silver at the temples, and a scar ran from his left eyebrow to his jaw, a white line that should have made him ugly, but somehow didn't. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, who'd never had to question whether he belonged anywhere. He was terrifying, and he was sprinting toward the building with an expression of raw panic that transformed his face from stone to something achingly human. "Oh, God," Elena whispered. She turned to the boy, who'd gone pale, his hands resuming their position over his ears. "Is that your father?" The boy nodded, and Elena saw something complex flash across his small face. Love and fear, and something else she couldn't name. She heard shouting in the hallway, the sound of doors being thrown open, and then the nurse's office door slammed inward hard enough to crack the doorframe. The man filled the doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the room with desperate intensity until they landed on the boy. For a moment, the world stopped. Elena watched the man's face crumple, watched him take in the blood on his son's clothes, the bruises forming on his small arms, the ice pack Elena had given him. "Marco," the man breathed, and his voice broke on the name. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees in front of the examination table. His hands hovered over his son, not touching, as if he was afraid the boy would shatter. "Marco, figlio mio, what happened? Who did this?" The boy, Marco, didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on Elena, his hand still gripping the sleeve of her uniform. The man followed his son's gaze, and when his eyes met Elena's, she felt the impact like a physical blow. His eyes were dark, almost black, and they held a rage so profound it made her step back involuntarily. "Who are you?" His voice was soft, deadly. "What did you do to my son?" Elena's mouth went dry. I'm the janitor, Elena Kovac. I found him in the stairwell. There were boys, older boys. They were—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The man's expression had gone from rage to something worse, something cold and calculating. "How many boys?" "4. Teenagers. They ran when I—" She gestured vaguely at the mop bucket she'd left in the stairwell. "When I stopped them." The man stood slowly, his movements controlled, and Elena realized he was exercising enormous self-restraint. Every line of his body screamed violence, but he was holding it back, channeling it somewhere internal. "Names. I need their names." "I don't. I only heard one. Tyler. The ringleader was called Tyler." Elena's voice sounded small in her own ears. She was aware of the men in the hallway, aware that she was trapped in this room with a man who looked like he could kill her without breaking a sweat. "I should call the school—" "No." The single word was a command. The man pulled out his phone, speaking rapid Italian to someone on the other end. Elena caught words. "Nomi, trovare, punire," and her stomach twisted. "Find, punish." She didn't need to speak Italian to understand what was being said. "Where are you watching from?" The man ended the call and turned back to Marco, his expression softening in a way that made Elena's chest ache. "Marco, I need you to come with Papa now. We're going home. You're safe." But Marco shook his head. His grip on Elena's sleeve tightened and he made a sound, high and distressed, that clearly communicated his refusal. The man's jaw clenched. He looked at Elena again, and this time she saw past the rage to something else. Desperation. Fear. This was a father who'd just found his son beaten and bloody, and the only person his son trusted was a stranger. "What did you do?" the man asked again, but his tone had changed. There was wonder in it now, confusion. "Marco doesn't trust anyone. Not since—" He cut himself off, his throat working. "He hasn't let anyone touch him in 2 years." Elena glanced at Marco, at his small hand still clutching her uniform, and, understanding, clicked into place. Trauma. The boy had experienced something terrible, something that had made him retreat into himself, and somehow, in that stairwell, She'd become safe. She'd become his anchor. I protected him, Elena said quietly. I didn't think. I just couldn't let them hurt him. The man studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his jacket and Elena's heart stopped, certain he was going for a weapon. Instead, he pulled out a business card, extending it toward her. Dante Moretti, I need to speak with you. Tomorrow. This address, 10 a.m. Elena took the card with shaking fingers. The address was in the most expensive part of the city, where she'd never set foot in her life. I work tomorrow. I can't. You'll be paid for your time. Dante's voice left no room for argument. He turned back to Marco, crouching down again. Marco, we need to go. The doctor needs to see you. Marco's eyes filled with tears. He looked at Elena, his expression pleading, and Elena felt something crack inside her chest. She knelt beside Dante, careful to maintain distance, and took Marco's free hand in hers. Hey, sweetheart, your papa needs to take you home now. You need to get checked out. Make sure you're okay. Marco shook his head frantically, and Elena squeezed his hand gently. I know you're scared, but your papa loves you so much. Look at his face. See how worried he is? Marco glanced at his father, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that made Elena feel like an intruder. Dante's eyes were wet, his composure cracking, and Marco's small hand reached out, touching his father's scarred cheek. Dante caught his son's hand, pressing it to his face, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. I'm sorry, Dante whispered in English, his accent thick. I'm so sorry I wasn't there. I should have protected you. I should have. His voice broke completely. Elena looked away, giving them privacy, but Marco tugged on her sleeve again. When she met his eyes, he pointed at her, then at his father, then made a gesture she didn't understand. Dante said something in Italian, his tone questioning, and Marco nodded emphatically. He wants you to come with us, Dante translated, his expression conflicted. To the hospital. He won't go without you. Every instinct Elena had screamed at her to refuse. These people were dangerous. She could see it in the armed men in the hallway, in the way Dante carried himself, in the fear that had flickered across the school security guard's face when the SUVs arrived. Getting involved with them would be the worst decision of her life. But Marco was looking at her with those huge, terrified eyes, and Elena thought of her brother, of all the times no one had come when he'd needed them. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll come. The relief on Marco's face was immediate. He slid off the examination table, positioning himself between Elena and his father, one hand gripping each of them. Dante's expression was unreadable as he looked down at their joined hands, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he nodded once, sharp and decisive, and led them out of the office. The hallway was full of men in suits, all of them armed, all of them watching Elena with suspicion. She kept her eyes down, her hand tight around Marco's, and let herself be guided through the school. Students and teachers had gathered, whispering, pointing, and Elena felt their stares like brands on her skin. By tomorrow, everyone would know. By tomorrow, her quiet, invisible life would be over. The SUV was obscenely luxurious inside, leather seats, tinted windows, a screen that separated the back from the driver. Dante lifted Marco into the seat, then gestured for Elena to sit beside him. She climbed in awkwardly, her cleaning uniform out of place against the expensive interior, and Marco immediately pressed against her side. Dante sat across from them, his phone already to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian that sounded like orders. The convoy moved as one, pulling out of the parking lot with the precision of a military operation. Elena watched Riverside Preparatory Academy disappear through the tinted windows and wondered if she'd ever see it again. Wondered if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life, or if somehow, impossibly, she'd just found her purpose. Marco's hand found hers in the darkness of the SUV, small and trusting, and Elena squeezed back. Whatever happened next, Whatever these people wanted from her, she'd made a promise in that stairwell. She'd protect this boy, no matter the cost. The hospital was private, exclusive, the kind of place that didn't take insurance because their patients didn't need it. Dante carried Marco through a private entrance, bypassing the emergency room entirely, and Elena followed in their wake like a ghost. Doctors appeared immediately, their deference to Dante absolute, and Marco was whisked into an examination room with Elena and Dante flanking him. The examination took an hour. Marco had a broken rib, severe bruising, and a concussion. The doctor spoke in hushed tones about trauma, about the importance of therapy, about how lucky Marco was that someone had intervened when they did. Dante's expression grew darker with each word, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, and Elena saw the moment he made a decision, saw the cold fury settle over his features like a mask. When they finally left the hospital, night had fallen. Marco was asleep, his small body limp with exhaustion and pain medication, cradled in his father's arms. Dante carried him to the SUV with a tenderness that contradicted everything else about him, settling him carefully in the seat before turning to Elena. "The address on my card. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't make me come find you." It wasn't a request. Elena nodded, too exhausted to argue, and watched the convoy drive away into the night. She stood alone in the hospital parking lot, her uniform still stained with Marco's blood, and wondered what the hell she'd gotten herself into. A cab ride she couldn't afford took her back to her apartment, a studio in the worst part of town, where the heat barely worked and the neighbors fought at all hours. Elena climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her ribs aching, and locked herself inside. The apartment was cold, empty, filled with the ghosts of her old life. Her husband's medical bills were stacked on the kitchen table, red stamps screaming, "Past due." Her bank account had $47. She was 3 weeks from eviction, and tomorrow she was supposed to meet with a man who was clearly involved in something illegal, something dangerous, because his son had grabbed onto her like she was the only safe thing in his world. Elena looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Tired eyes, premature lines, a bruise forming on her cheekbone from where one of the teenagers had clipped her. She looked like what she was, a woman barely surviving, invisible to everyone who mattered. But Marco had seen her. Marco had trusted her. And for the first time in 2 years, Elena felt like maybe she mattered after all. She set her alarm for 8 a.m., knowing she wouldn't sleep, and lay down on her lumpy mattress. Her mind replayed the day, the sound of Marco's crying, the feel of the bucket connecting with bone, Dante's expression when he'd seen his son. She thought about the way Marco had signed safe when he looked at her, the way he'd refused to let go. Tomorrow would change everything. Elena could feel it in her bones, in the way her heart raced when she thought about Dante's dark eyes, in the way Marco's small hand had fit so perfectly in hers. Tomorrow, she would walk into a world she didn't understand, a world of wealth and violence and secrets. But tonight, she'd saved a child. Tonight, she'd been brave, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The alarm woke her at 8, though she'd barely slept. Elena showered, washing Marco's blood from her skin, and dressed in the only professional clothes she owned, black slacks and a white blouse, both worn but clean. She took the bus to the address on Dante's card, watching the city transform around her as she moved from her neighborhood to his. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, more beautiful. The people on the streets looked different, confident, purposeful, expensive. The address was a mansion. There was no other word for it. Iron gates surrounded a property that sprawled across what had to be 40 acres, with manicured gardens and fountains that probably cost more than Elena would make in her lifetime. Armed guards stood at the gate, and when Eleni approached on foot, they stopped her with expressions that suggested she was something unpleasant they'd found on their shoes. "I'm here to see Dante Moretti. He asked me to come." Elena held up the business card like a talisman. The guards exchanged glances. One spoke into a radio, and after a tense moment, the gates swung open. "Someone will escort you to the house." A golf cart appeared, driven by a woman in a formal uniform who looked at Elena with barely concealed curiosity. They drove through the grounds in silence, and Elena tried not to gape at the wealth surrounding her. This wasn't just money. This was generational wealth, the kind that bought power and influence and immunity from consequences. The mansion itself was stunning. White stone, 3 stories, with columns that belonged on a government building. The woman led Elena through the front entrance into a foyer that made her want to weep. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that belonged in museums. A grand staircase swept upward, and Elena counted 17 security cameras in the foyer alone. "Wait here," the woman said, disappearing through a side door. Elena waited, her hands clasped in front of her, feeling like an imposter. Staff members passed, all in formal attire, all giving her curious looks. She heard whispers in Italian, caught her name, caught the word Marco. News traveled fast in this house. Footsteps on the stairs made her look up. Dante descended slowly, dressed more casually than yesterday. Dark jeans, a black shirt that did nothing to hide his powerful build. Without the suit, he looked younger, more human, though no less dangerous. His eyes found hers, and Elena felt that same jolt of awareness, that same sense that she was being catalogued, assessed, judged. "Miss Kovach, thank you for coming." His English was better today, the accent still present but controlled. "Please, follow me." He led her through the mansion to a study that smelled of leather and old books. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined the walls, filled with volumes in multiple languages. A massive desk dominated the space, and behind it, windows overlooked the gardens. Dante gestured to a chair, and Elena sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Dante didn't sit. He paced, his movements restless, and Elena recognized the signs of a man trying to control himself. Finally, he stopped in front of her, his expression grave. "I had you investigated last night. I know everything about you." He held up a hand when Elena opened her mouth to protest. "Your husband, the cancer, the debt, your brother, the foster care system. I know you work 3 jobs and still can't make rent. I know you're drowning." Elena's face burned with humiliation. Her life, laid bare by this stranger, all her failures and losses catalogued like items on a list. "Then you know I'm no one. I can't help you with whatever. You're wrong." Dante's voice was sharp. "You're the only one who can help me. Marco hasn't trusted anyone since his mother died. 2 years, Miss Kovach. 2 years of therapists and caretakers and specialists, all of them failing. And then you, a janitor with a mop bucket. You reach him in minutes." Elena's throat tightened. His mother? Dante's jaw clenched. Murdered, in front of him. He watched her die and he hasn't spoken since. Hasn't let anyone touch him without having a meltdown. Until you. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. Elena thought of Marco's eyes, the terror in them, the way he'd clung to her. "I'm so sorry. That's horrible. The men responsible are dead." Dante said it flatly, matter-of-factly, and Elena's blood ran cold. "But Marco is still broken, and I don't know how to fix him. I'm not a therapist. I'm not qualified to. I don't need a therapist. I need someone he trusts. Someone who can be there when he wakes up screaming. Someone who can help him feel safe again." Dante moved closer, and Elena resisted the urge to lean back. "I'm offering you a job. Live here, take care of Marco, help him heal." Elena's mind raced. Live here, in this mansion, with this dangerous man and his traumatized son. I can't just. I have a life. I have bills, responsibilities. $50,000 a month. Your debt paid off immediately. Your apartment lease terminated. Everything you own moved here by tomorrow. Dante's voice was calm, businesslike, as if he was discussing a simple transaction. You'll have your own room, full access to the house, anything you need. All I ask is that you help my son." $50,000 a month. Elena's brain stuttered over the number. She made $25,000 a year, barely, working herself to exhaustion. This man was offering her more than twice her annual salary every single month. It was impossible. It was insane. "And if I say no?" Dante's expression hardened. "Then I make a phone call to Riverside Preparatory. I explain that you assaulted 4 students, that you're a liability. They fire you. I make another call, and no other school in the city will hire. You're blackballed. Your debt collectors will come for you, and you'll lose everything." Elena's hands clenched in her lap. "You're threatening me." "I'm being honest." Dante leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "I need you, Ms. Kovach. My son needs you. And I will do whatever it takes to keep him safe, even if that means forcing your hand. But I'd rather you choose to help us." "That's not a choice, that's coercion. Call it what you want. The offer stands. $50,000 a month. Your freedom in exchange for my son's healing." Elena wanted to throw the offer back in his face, wanted to storm out, to maintain her dignity, to prove she couldn't be bought. But she thought of her brother, of how she'd been powerless to save him. She thought of Marco's small hand in hers, the way he'd looked at her like she was salvation. She thought of her empty apartment, her crushing debt, the way she'd felt invisible for so long. 3 months, she heard herself say. "I'll give you 3 months. After that I leave no matter what." Dante studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 3 months, starting today. Before Elena could respond, before she could process what she'd just agreed to, the study door opened. Marco stood in the doorway wearing dinosaur pajamas, his dark hair mussed from sleep. His eyes found Elena immediately, and his face transformed, the fear melting into something like joy. He ran to her, and Elena opened her arms instinctively. Marco crashed into her, his small body trembling, and Elena held him close, her heart breaking for this child who'd lost so much. He buried his face in her shoulder, and she felt wetness seeping through her blouse, tears, silent and devastating. "Hey, sweetheart," Elena whispered, stroking his hair. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Marco pulled back enough to look at her face. His hands moved, signing something, and Elena glanced helplessly at Dante. The man's expression had softened, the hard edges smoothing into something achingly vulnerable. "He's asking if you're staying," Dante translated quietly. "If you're his now." Elena's vision blurred. She looked down at Marco, at his hopeful, terrified expression, and knew she was lost. 3 months. She'd promised 3 months. But looking at this boy, feeling the way he clung to her like she was the only solid thing in his world, Elena suspected 3 months wouldn't be nearly enough. "Yes," she said, signing it as best she could, hoping he understood. "I'm staying. I'm yours." Marco's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. He signed something else, rapid and excited, and Dante's laugh was surprised, genuine, the first real emotion Elena had heard from him. "He says you're his mama now, his Elena mama." Elena's throat closed completely. She looked at Dante over Marco's head, saw the complexity in his expression, gratitude and fear and something else she couldn't name. Their eyes held, and Elena felt the weight of what she'd agreed to settle over her like a mantle. This wasn't just a job. This wasn't just 3 months. This was a family, broken and dangerous and desperate. And somehow, impossibly, she was now part of it. The days that followed blurred into a routine that felt surreal. Elena's belongings, pathetically few, were moved into a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment had been. The room had silk sheets, a private bathroom with heated floors, and windows that overlooked the gardens. It was beautiful and terrifying, a gilded cage that reminded her constantly that this wasn't her world. But Marco made it bearable. Marco made it worth it. They established patterns quickly. Mornings began with Elena waking to find Marco standing beside her bed, waiting patiently for her to open her eyes. She'd learned not to startle, to greet him with a smile and a soft, "Good morning, sweetheart." They'd have breakfast together in the kitchen. Marco insisted on sitting beside her, their chairs touching, while staff bustled around them and Dante took calls in his office. Elena created visual schedules for Marco, using pictures and symbols to help him understand what would happen each day. She learned his triggers. Sudden, loud noises made him cover his ears and rock. Bright, fluorescent lights caused meltdowns. Certain textures were unbearable. She adapted, dimming lights, warning him before any loud sounds, letting him wear his favorite soft shirt every day, even though Rosa, the housekeeper, protested that he needed variety. "He needs consistency more than he needs fashion," Elena told Rosa firmly, and the older woman had smiled, patting Elena's cheek. "You're good for him. For both of them." Elena didn't know what to make of that, so she focused on Marco. They spent hours in the garden, where Marco would arrange leaves and stones in complex patterns only he understood. Elena sat beside him, not interfering, just present. Sometimes she'd read aloud, children's books at first, then Harry Potter when she realized Marco's comprehension was far beyond his age. He couldn't speak, but he understood everything. Slowly, incrementally, Marco began to trust her with more. He let her help him dress, let her cut his food, let her hold him when nightmares woke him screaming in the middle of the night. Elena learned to recognize the signs of an impending meltdown and could often redirect him before it escalated. She learned his favorite foods, his favorite songs, the way he liked his blankets arranged just so. And she learned about Dante. The man was a study in contradictions. He ran his business. Elena didn't ask what that entailed, though she could guess, with ruthless efficiency, taking calls at all hours, meeting with men in expensive suits who looked at him with a mixture of respect and fear. But with Marco, he was gentle, patient, his love for his son evident in every gesture. Elena would catch him watching them, sometimes standing in doorways or looking down from his office window as she and Marco played in the garden. His expression was always unreadable, but Elena sensed longing in it, a desperate wish to be part of what they were building. 3 weeks into her stay, the breakthrough came. It was afternoon, and Elena had set up an art station in the sunroom. Washable paints, large sheets of paper, brushes in various sizes. Marco loved patterns, loved organizing things. So Elena had given him colored blocks to arrange however he wanted. She sat beside him, working on her own painting, a clumsy attempt at the garden view, while Marco sorted his blocks by color, then by size, then by some system only he understood. The sun was warm through the windows. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers. It was peaceful, safe, and Elena felt herself relaxing in a way she hadn't since her husband died. She was humming along to the music, not really paying attention, when Marco's hand appeared in her peripheral vision. He was holding a blue block, offering it to her. Elena's breath caught. In 3 weeks, Marco had never initiated contact like this. He accepted touch from her, sought comfort, but he didn't offer, didn't reach out first. She set down her paintbrush slowly, carefully, and turned to face him. Marco's eyes met hers. Direct eye contact. 3 full seconds. An eternity for a child who usually looked everywhere but at faces. "Elena." His voice was rusty, uncertain, the syllables unpracticed, but it was her name in his voice, and Elena felt tears spill over before she could stop them. "Yes, baby, I'm Elena. You said my name." Her voice shook. "You spoke." Marco's small hand reached up, touching her wet cheek with confusion. He'd seen her cry before. She couldn't help it sometimes, overwhelmed by his pain, by the enormity of what he'd survived. But this was different. These were happy tears, and Marco seemed to understand the distinction. His expression shifted, something like pride flickering across his features. "Elena," he said again, more confidently. Then his hand moved to his own chest. "Marco." "Yes, you're Marco. Oh, sweetheart, you're talking. You're—" Elena couldn't finish. She pulled him into her arms, holding him close, and Marco let her, his small body relaxing against hers. From the doorway came a sound, half gasp, half sob. Elena looked up to see Dante standing there, one hand pressed against the doorframe as if he needed the support. His face was transformed, the hard mask cracked completely, tears streaming down his scarred cheeks. "Marco," he breathed. "Figlio mio." Marco turned in Elena's arms, seeing his father. For a moment, Elena thought he might retreat, might close back up. But instead, Marco smiled, a real, genuine smile, and signed something. Elena didn't understand it, but Dante clearly did. He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside them. "Papa," Marco whispered. The word was barely audible, but it might as well have been a shout for the way Dante reacted. He gathered his son into his arms, his shoulders shaking with the force of his emotion, and Marco let him, hugging back with his small arms. Elena started to stand, to give them privacy, but Marco's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. He pulled her back down, positioning himself between her and Dante, one hand gripping each of them. His message was clear. Family. All of them together. Dante's eyes met Elena's over Marco's head, and the gratitude in them was so profound it made her chest ache. "Thank you," he mouthed. Elena shook her head. She hadn't done anything, just been present, just cared, but Dante's expression said he disagreed, said she'd done everything. They stayed like that for a long time, the 3 of them tangled together on the sunroom floor, while Marco repeated his small vocabulary. Elena, Papa, safe, and both adults tried not to fall apart completely. When they finally separated, when Rosa brought hot chocolate and cookies and fussed over Marco with tears in her own eyes, Elena felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just a job anymore. This wasn't just 3 months. This was her life now, her family, and the thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That evening, after Marco was asleep, Dante found Elena in the library. She was curled up in one of the leather chairs trying to read, but her mind kept replaying the afternoon. She looked up when he entered, and the expression on his face made her heart skip. "Can I talk to you?" His voice was different, softer, vulnerable in a way she'd never heard. "Of course." Dante poured 2 glasses of whiskey from the bar cart, offering one to Elena. She took it, surprised. She'd never been offered alcohol in this house, had assumed it was off-limits to staff. But Dante sat in the chair across from hers, not maintaining the distance he usually did, and Elena realized something had changed between them too. "I need to tell you about Maria," he said quietly, "about what happened. You deserve to know." Elena wanted to say he didn't have to, that it wasn't her business, but the words died in her throat. She did need to know. If she was going to help Marco heal, she needed to understand what he'd survived. Dante stared into his glass, his jaw tight. "We were childhood sweethearts. Grew up in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, back when my father was still building his empire. Maria knew what I was, what I would become, and she loved me anyway." His voice cracked on the last word. "She was good. Too good for me. Too good for this life." "What happened?" Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Calabrese family, rival organization. They wanted my territory, wanted to send a message." Dante's hand tightened around his glass. "They came to our home. Marco was 6. He and Maria were in the garden, and I was in my office, taking a fucking phone call. I heard the shots. By the time I got there, she was—" He couldn't finish. Elena's hand moved without conscious thought, covering his. Dante stared at their joined hands, his expression stunned, as if he couldn't believe she'd touched him. Marco saw everything. He watched his mother die, watched me kill the men who did it. That's when he stopped talking, stopped letting anyone touch him. The trauma specialist said he might never recover. But he is recovering, Elena said firmly. He spoke today. He's making progress. Because of you. Dante turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. The contact sent electricity up Elena's arm. You've given him something I couldn't. Safety, peace, a reason to try again. You give him that too. He loves you, Dante. Anyone can see it. He's afraid of me, afraid of what I am, what I do. Dante's voice was raw with pain. I'm a killer, Elena. I've done terrible things. Marco knows that. He saw it. Elena thought about her response carefully. She could feel the weight of this moment, the way Dante was offering her something. Truth, vulnerability, a glimpse behind the mask. You're also a father who loves his son more than anything, who's trying to help him heal, who cries when he speaks for the first time in 2 years. She squeezed his hand. People aren't just one thing. You can be both. Dante's eyes searched hers, and Elena saw the moment something shifted in him. Saw walls coming down, defenses crumbling. I failed them. I failed to protect Maria. I'm failing Marco. No. Elena's voice was sharp. You're doing everything you can. You brought me here. You're giving Marco every chance to heal. That's not failure. That's love. They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined, the weight of shared grief and hope hanging between them. Finally, Dante spoke again, his voice so quiet Elena almost missed it. I'm falling in love with you. Elena's heart stopped. She stared at him, certain she'd misheard, but Dante's expression was open, vulnerable, terrified. What? I know I shouldn't. I know it's wrong. You work for me. You're here for Marco, not for me. But I can't. He pulled his hand away, running it through his hair. I watch you with him. I see the way you care. The way you've given up everything to help a child who isn't yours. I see your strength, your compassion, and He stood abruptly, pacing. I'm sorry. Forget I said anything. This was inappropriate. Elena stood too, her mind racing. She should agree. Should maintain professional boundaries. Should remember that this man was dangerous, that his world was violence and crime, that getting involved with him would be the worst decision of her life. But she thought about the way he'd cried when Marco spoke, the way he looked at his son with such desperate love, the way he'd just offered her his truth, his vulnerability, risking rejection because he couldn't keep it inside anymore. I'm falling in love with you too, she whispered. Dante froze, turned, stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Elena. I know it's crazy. I know it's too fast, too complicated, but I can't help it. Elena moved closer, her heart pounding. You're not what I expected. You're more. The distance between them closed in a heartbeat. Dante's hands cupped her face, his touch gentle despite his size, and Elena's breath caught. If we do this, he said, his voice rough, there's no going back. My world is dangerous. People will use you to get to me. You'll be a target. I'm already a target. I'm living in your house, caring for your son. The danger is already there. This is different. This makes it real. It's already real, Elena breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was everything. Desperate and tender, fierce and gentle. 2 years of loneliness and pain pouring into the connection between them. Dante kissed her like she was oxygen, like she was salvation, and Elena kissed back with equal intensity. His hands slid into her hair, and she gripped his shoulders, pulling him closer, wanting to erase every inch of space between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Cristo, Elena, what are you doing to me? The same thing you're doing to me, she whispered back. A sound from the doorway made them spring apart. Marco stood there in his dinosaur pajamas, his favorite stuffed dinosaur clutched in one hand. He looked between them, his expression confused, and Elena's face burned with embarrassment. But then Marco smiled, signing something, and Dante laughed, a real, genuine laugh that transformed his face. "What did he say?" Elena asked. "He said, Papa, happy. Elena, happy. Marco, happy." Dante's voice was thick with emotion. "He wants to know if we're family now." Elena looked at Marco, at his hopeful expression, then at Dante, at the love and fear and hope in his eyes. She thought about her empty apartment, her crushing debt, the way she'd felt invisible for so long. She thought about the last 3 weeks, about Marco's progress, about the way this broken family had somehow become hers. "Yes," she said, signing it for Marco. "We're family." Marco ran to them, and they caught him together, the three of them holding each other in the library while the fire crackled and the night deepened outside. Elena felt Dante's lips brush her temple, felt Marco's small body relaxed and safe between them, and thought that maybe, just maybe, she'd found where she belonged. But the peace didn't last. 5 weeks into her stay at the mansion, Elena woke to Dante shaking her shoulder, his face grim. "We need to talk. Now." Elena sat up, her heart racing. It was barely dawn, the sky outside still gray. "What's wrong? Is Marco—" "Marco's fine. He's with Rosa." Dante's jaw was tight. "Get dressed. Meet me in my office in 5 minutes." He left before Elena could ask more questions. She threw on clothes, her mind racing through possibilities. Had something happened? Had someone been hurt? She ran down the hallway to Dante's office where she found him standing behind his desk, his phone in his hand, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. "The Calabrese family," he said without preamble. "They're planning something. My intelligence network intercepted communications. They've identified you as Marco's weakness. They know he's attached to you." Elena's blood turned to ice. "What do they want?" "To hurt me. To destroy everything I love." Dante's voice was flat, controlled, but Elena could see the rage simmering beneath. "They plan to kidnap you, use you as bait to draw me into an ambush, then kill all of us, you, me, Marco." The room tilted. Elena gripped the edge of the desk. "When?" "We have 72 hours, maybe less." Dante moved around the desk, gripping her shoulders. "I can get you out. New identity, new city, enough money to start over. You'll be safe." "And Marco?" Elena's voice shook. "What happens to him?" Dante's expression cracked. "He'll be devastated, but he'll be alive." Elena thought about Marco's smile that morning, the way he'd hugged her and whispered, "Elena, Mama." She thought about the progress they'd made, the trust they'd built. She thought about leaving, about Marco waking up to find her gone without explanation, about the trauma that would cause on top of everything he'd already survived. "No," she said firmly, "I'm not leaving." "Elena!" "I'm not leaving him. I'm not leaving you." She pulled away from his grip, pacing. "What's the alternative? What's your plan?" Dante studied her for a long moment, and Elena saw the war happening behind his eyes, the desire to protect her battling with the need to respect her choice. Finally, he nodded. "Lockdown, full security protocol, you don't leave the property, armed escorts everywhere, and we prepare for the worst." Then that's what we do. The next 3 days were tense. The mansion transformed into a fortress. 20 additional guards patrolled the grounds. Every window was bulletproofed. Every door was reinforced. Elena couldn't walk to the bathroom without 2 armed men flanking her, and while she understood the necessity, the constant surveillance made her feel like a prisoner. Marco sensed the tension. His stimming increased. He rocked more, hummed more, his hands constantly moving in self-soothing patterns. Elena tried to maintain their routine, but it was hard when they couldn't go to the garden, when every room felt like a cage. She read to him, played with him, held him when he got overwhelmed, but she could see the fear creeping back into his eyes. On the second night, Dante found her in Marco's room. She was sitting on the floor beside Marco's bed, watching him sleep, and Dante sat beside her without speaking. They stayed like that for a long time, shoulders touching, sharing the vigil. "I can't lose you," Dante finally said. "Either of you." "You won't." Elena took his hand. "We're going to get through this." "You don't know that. These men, they're ruthless. They won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me." "Then we make sure they don't get the chance." Elena turned to face him. "You've survived this long. You've protected Marco for 2 years. We can do this." Dante's hand came up, cupping her cheek. "You're so brave. Too brave. It terrifies me." "Good. We can be terrified together." Elena leaned into his touch. "But we don't give up. We don't let them win." Dante kissed her then, soft and desperate, and Elena kissed back, pouring all her fear and love and determination into the connection. When they broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I know it's too soon. I know it's crazy, but I love you." "I love you too." The words felt right, felt true, despite everything. "And we're going to survive this, all of us." The attack came at 2:37 a.m. on the third night. Elena woke to the sound of an explosion, the east wall of the mansion shaking with the impact. Alarms shrieked, red lights flashing, and Elena's training kicked in. She rolled out of bed, grabbing the gun Dante had insisted she keep in her nightstand, and ran for Marco's room. He was already awake, screaming, hands over his ears. Elena scooped him up, ignoring his thrashing, and headed for the safe room. Gunfire erupted somewhere below. Rapid bursts, shouts in Italian, the sound of breaking glass. Smoke filled the hallways, making Elena's eyes water, and Marco's screams intensified. "It's okay, baby. I've got you," Elena gasped, running. "We're going to be safe. Just hold on to me." She could hear footsteps behind her. Heavy boots, multiple people. Elena didn't look back. She turned the corner toward the safe room, Marco's weight making her arms burn, and nearly collided with 2 men in tactical gear. Not Dante's men. Enemy soldiers. One raised his gun, aiming at Marco, and Elena didn't think. She threw herself forward, twisting so her body was between the gun and the child. The bullet hit her left shoulder, white-hot agony that made her vision gray, but she kept moving. She crashed into the safe room entrance, Marco clutching her neck, and slammed the steel door shut with her good hand. The lock engaged with a solid thunk. Elena collapsed against the door, her shoulders screaming, blood soaking through her shirt. Marco was crying, his small body shaking violently, covered in her blood. Elena forced herself to focus through the pain. She hit the panic button with her good hand, then pulled Marco into her lap. "Shh, sweetheart, you're safe. You're safe." Her voice came out weak, thready. "Mama's got you. Always got you." Marco's hands moved frantically, signing something Elena couldn't understand through her pain-blurred vision. She held him closer, ignoring the way her shoulder protested, and started singing. The Croatian lullaby her mother had taught her, the one that always calmed Marco down. Her voice shook, broke on the high notes, but she kept singing. Outside the safe room, the battle raged. Elena could hear it through the reinforced walls. Gunfire, explosions, screams. She prayed Dante was okay, prayed his men were winning, prayed they'd all survive this nightmare. Marco's signing became more insistent. Elena looked down at him through tears and realized what he was saying. "Mama hurt. Mama bleeding. Help Mama." "I'm okay, baby. Just a scratch." The lie tasted bitter, but Marco needed her calm. "Papa's coming. He'll fix everything." As if summoned by her words, the safe room door's external panel beeped. Elena tensed, raising the gun with her good hand, ready to defend Marco with her last breath if necessary. The door swung open, and Dante stood there, covered in blood that might or might not be his own, his eyes wild. "Christo, no, no, no." He was across the room in a heartbeat, dropping to his knees beside them. His hands hovered over Elena's shoulder, his face going white. "You're shot, you're—" He looked at Marco, at the blood covering his son, and something in him broke. "Elena, stay with me. Don't you dare." "I'm okay," Elena managed. "Marco's safe. That's what matters." "Medic!" Dante roared toward the door. "Now!" His lieutenant appeared carrying a medical kit. Dante applied pressure to Elena's wound, his hands shaking, and Elena bit back a scream. Marco was crying, signing, "Mama!" over and over, and Elena forced herself to smile at him. "See, Papa's here. We're all okay." Dante's expression was murderous. He looked at his lieutenant. "Status: 5 hostiles down, 2 captured, 3 of our men injured, none critical. The estate is secure." "And the Calabrese? Being interrogated now?" Dante nodded once, then turned his full attention back to Elena. The medic worked on her shoulder, and Elena's vision grayed at the edges. She felt Dante's hand on her face, heard him saying her name, felt Marco's small body pressed against her good side. "Non mi lasciare," Dante whispered. Don't leave me. Please, Elena, don't leave me." "Not going anywhere," Elena slurred. "Promised, Marco. Promised you." The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Dante's face, tears streaming down his scarred cheeks, and Marco signing, "Family," with desperate intensity. Then darkness claimed her, and Elena let herself fall, trusting they'd catch her. She woke 16 hours later in the mansion's medical wing, a fully equipped hospital room she hadn't known existed. Her shoulder throbbed with a deep, persistent ache, and when she tried to move, pain lanced through her. But she was alive. She'd survived. Dante sat beside her bed, unshaven, still in his blood-stained clothes, looking like he'd aged 10 years. When he saw her eyes open, his expression crumpled. "Elena! Grazie a Dio! Marco!" Her voice came out as a croak. "Right here." Dante shifted, and Elena saw Marco curled up on her other side, asleep on top of the blankets. He was clean now, dressed in fresh pajamas, but his face was tear-stained and his hand was wrapped around her good arm. "He wouldn't leave you. Hasn't left since you got out of surgery." Elena's throat closed. She reached out with her good hand, stroking Marco's hair, and he stirred. His eyes opened, and when he saw she was awake, his face transformed. He sat up carefully, signing frantically, and Elena wished desperately that she understood. "He's saying he loves you," Dante translated, his voice thick, "that you saved him, that you're the bravest mama in the world. Oh, baby." Elena pulled Marco close with her good arm, ignoring the protest from her shoulder. "I love you too, so much." Marco buried his face in her neck, his small body shaking with sobs, and Elena held him while Dante held them both. They stayed like that for a long time, a tangle of relief and love and trauma, until Marco finally fell back asleep. Dante helped Elena settle Marco back on the bed, then took her good hand in both of his. "You took a bullet for my son. There are no words, Elena. There's nothing I can say that's enough." "He's my son, too," Elena said simply. "I wasn't going to let anyone hurt him." Dante's grip tightened. "I killed them. The men who shot you. I killed them slowly, and I'm not sorry." Elena should have been horrified, should have been repulsed by the violence, by the cold certainty in Dante's voice. But she thought about the man aiming at Marco, about the terror in her son's eyes, and she couldn't find it in herself to care. "Good," she said, and meant it. Dante's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like relief. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm afraid for you, for Marco, for all of us." Elena squeezed his hand. "But not of you, never of you." "I don't deserve you." "Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway." Elena managed a weak smile. "I made a promise. 3 months. though I think we're well past that now. You can still leave. I can still protect you, give you a new life. Dante. Elena's voice was firm despite her weakness. I'm not leaving. This is my life now. You and Marco. You're my family. The only family I need. Dante leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. Ti amo. I love you more than I thought I could love anything. I love you too. Elena closed her eyes, breathing him in. Gun oil and expensive cologne and something uniquely him. We're going to be okay. All of us. Recovery took 10 days. Elena's shoulder healed slowly. The physical therapy painful but necessary. Dante barely left her side, working from her room, taking calls while sitting in the chair beside her bed. Marco slept with her every night, his small body pressed against her good side, as if he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. During those long days, Elena had time to think, to process what had happened, what she'd witnessed. She'd seen 3 men die violently, had watched Dante kill with cold efficiency, had heard the screams of the captured soldiers before they'd been executed. The violence should have traumatized her, should have made her question everything. But it didn't, because she understood now, in a way she hadn't before, that this was the price of their safety. Dante's world was brutal, unforgiving, and the only way to survive it was to be more brutal than your enemies. He'd done what was necessary to protect his family, their family, and Elena couldn't fault him for that. Rosa brought her tea one afternoon, settling into the chair Dante had vacated to take a call. The older woman studied Elena with knowing eyes. You're thinking too much. How can you tell? I've been with this family for 20 years. I know the look. Rosa poured the tea, adding honey the way Elena liked. You're wondering if you made the right choice, if you can live with what you saw. Elena didn't deny it. Can I? Can I really be part of this world? Rosa was quiet for a moment, stirring her own tea. I was trafficked when I was 17, brought to this country, sold like property. Dante's father found me, bought my freedom, gave me a job. When Dante took over, he could have sent me away. Instead, he made me family. She looked at Elena directly. This world is dark. There's violence, danger, things that would make normal people run. But there's also loyalty, protection, love that's fierce enough to kill for. You have to decide if that's enough. It is, Elena said without hesitation. I'd take 1,000 bullets for Marco, for Dante. That's not even a question. Rosa smiled. Then you're already part of this world. You just needed to accept it. Over the next week, Elena watched as Dante systematically eliminated the remaining Calabrese leadership. He didn't hide it from her, came to her each evening, washed the blood from his hands, and told her what he'd done. Elena listened, held him when the weight of it became too much, and never once judged him. She was complicit now. She understood that. By staying, by loving him, by choosing this family, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But watching Marco thrive, seeing his vocabulary expand to 30 words, witnessing the way he laughed now, really laughed, with joy and abandon, Elena knew she'd made the right choice. The captured soldiers had revealed everything before they died, including the name of the traitor in Dante's organization. Antonio, one of his trusted lieutenants, had provided the Calabrese with security schedules and weaknesses. Dante had handled it personally, and Elena had seen him afterward, hands shaking, expression haunted, the weight of betrayal crushing him. He was like a brother, Dante had whispered, and Elena had held him while he broke. 2 weeks after the attack, Dante found Elena in the garden. Marco was with his tutor. Dante had hired specialists to work with him, to help him continue developing his speech and social skills, and Elena was enjoying the autumn sunshine, her shoulder finally healing enough that she could move without pain. Dante sat beside her on the bench, taking her hand. I need to tell you something. Elena's heart skipped, but his expression wasn't grim. If anything, he looked nervous. What is it? I love you. I'm in love with you. Completely, irrevocably. And He took a breath. I want you to marry me. Not because of Marco, though he's part of it, but because I cannot imagine my life without you, because you've become the center of my world, and I want to make it official. I want everyone to know you're mine, and I'm yours. Elena's breath caught. Dante, I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other 2 months. But I've never been more certain of anything. He pulled a ring from his pocket, an emerald surrounded by diamonds, antique and beautiful. This was my grandmother's. She survived the war, built a life in a new country, loved my grandfather until the day she died. I want that for us. That kind of love, that kind of partnership. Elena looked at the ring, then at Dante, then at the garden where she'd first bonded with Marco. She thought about her old life, the loneliness, the struggle, the way she'd felt invisible. She thought about the last 2 months, the danger, the violence, but also the love, the family, the sense of belonging she'd never had before. Yes, she said, and watched Dante's face transform. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he kissed her, soft and reverent, and Elena kissed back, tasting salt from tears she wasn't sure were his or hers. When they broke apart, Marco was standing a few feet away, his tutor behind him, his expression delighted. "Mama, marry Papa," he said clearly, and both adults laughed through their tears. Marco ran to them, and they caught him together, the 3 of them holding each other in the garden while the autumn leaves fell around them like blessings. But their happiness was short-lived. 3 days after the proposal, FBI agent Torres approached Elena during one of Marco's therapy appointments. She was sitting in the waiting room reading when the agent sat down beside her. Ms. Kovac, or should I say, future Mrs. Moretti. Elena's blood ran cold. She looked up at the agent, middle-aged, tired eyes, the expression of someone who'd seen too much. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. We know about the engagement. We know about the attack 3 weeks ago. We know Dante Moretti killed 17 men in the aftermath. Torres leaned forward. We want your testimony. Help us put him away, and we'll give you immunity, witness protection, a fresh start. I don't have anything to testify about. You're living in his house, caring for his son. You're complicit in his crimes just by being there. Torres's voice was firm but not unkind. I know he's got you convinced he's a good man, that he's just protecting his family. But Dante Moretti is a murderer, Ms. Kovac. He's killed dozens of people. He runs drugs, weapons, prostitution rings, and you're helping him by staying silent. Elena thought about the men who'd tried to kill Marco, about the bullet that had torn through her shoulder, about the way Dante looked at his son, the way he'd cried when Marco spoke. He's a father who loves his child. That's all I know. Torres sighed. Then you're choosing to be blind. When this all comes crashing down, and it will, you'll go down with him. Is that really what you want? What I want is for you to leave me alone. I can't do that. Too many people have died because of Dante Moretti. Too many families destroyed. I won't let him destroy yours, too. Torres stood, pulling out a card. When you're ready to do the right thing, call me. The offer stands. Elena took the card, then immediately pulled out her phone. She recorded the entire conversation. Torres's offer, his threats, everything. It was legal in this state to record without consent, and Dante's lawyers would know what to do with it. That evening, she gave the recording to Dante. His expression darkened as he listened, but he didn't explode the way she'd expected. Instead, he called his legal team, and within hours, they'd filed complaints against Torres for harassment and attempted coercion. The FBI investigation stalled, unable to find concrete evidence, and Torres's threats became empty. But the damage was done. The media got wind of the story. Mafia boss's fiancé, former janitor who stopped school bullies. Elena's photo circulated, her old colleagues gave interviews, and suddenly their private life was public fodder. Parents at Riverside demanded investigations. Reporters camped outside the estate gates. Elena's phone, which she'd kept despite Dante's offers to replace it, rang constantly with calls from journalists. Marco was affected worst of all. The attention, the cameras, the constant questions, it triggered his anxiety. His meltdowns increased, his progress stalled, and Elena watched helplessly as her son regressed. She wanted to scream at the reporters, to make them understand the damage they were causing, but Dante's PR team handled it instead, spinning the narrative as best they could. Elena became the hero janitor, the woman who'd risked everything to save a child. It was true, but it felt reductive, like her entire life had been condensed into a single moment. Her old friends reached out, some supportive, others judgmental, all of them wanting something from her. Her aunt called, begging her to leave that man, to come home, to see reason. "This isn't you, Elena," her aunt said. "You're a good person. You don't belong in that world." "I belong with my family," Elena replied and hung up. Late one night, Elena stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the estate grounds. Armed guards patrolled, security cameras tracked every movement. She was safe here, but she was also trapped. She thought about her old apartment, her old life, the simplicity she'd lost. Dante found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Talk to me." "I miss being invisible," Elena admitted. "I miss when my biggest problem was making rent. I miss—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I'm sorry. That's not fair. It's honest." Dante's voice was gentle. "I've taken everything from you. Your privacy, your safety, your old life. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I chose this." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I chose you. I chose Marco. I'd choose you both 1,000 times over." "Even knowing what it costs?" "Even knowing." She touched his face, tracing the scar. "I'm not going to lie and say it's easy. The attention, the judgment, the constant fear. It's hard. But you know what's harder? Imagining my life without you. Without Marco. That's impossible." Dante pulled her close and Elena let herself sink into his embrace. They stood like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other until Marco appeared in the doorway, unable to sleep. They brought him to bed with them. The three of them curled together and Elena felt the doubt fade. This was her family. This was her choice, and she'd defend it with everything she had. 6 weeks after the proposal, Dante took Elena and Marco to the beach house where he'd proposed to Maria. Elena tensed when she realized where they were going, uncertain about visiting a place with so much history, but Dante's expression was peaceful. "Maria would want this," he said quietly as they walked along the shore. "She'd want Marco to see that love can survive loss, that it's okay to move forward." Marco ran ahead, collecting shells, his laughter carried on the ocean breeze. He'd made so much progress, now using over 200 words, making eye contact regularly, even making a friend in his therapy group. Watching him play, Elena felt her chest swell with pride. Dante knelt in the sand, and Elena's breath caught. "I know we're already engaged, but I want to do this right, here where I learned what love means, where I lost it and found it again." He took her hands. "Elena Kovac, will you marry me? Will you be Marco's mother, my wife, my partner in this crazy, dangerous life?" "Yes," Elena said, tears streaming. "Always, yes." Marco ran back, his hands full of shells. He arranged them carefully in Elena's palm, signing something. Dante translated, his voice breaking. "He says, these are for Mama's wedding, to make her beautiful." Elena pulled Marco into her arms, holding him close while Dante held them both. The ocean crashed behind them, the sun setting in brilliant oranges and pinks, and Elena thought about how far they'd come. From a stairwell to a beach, from strangers to family, from broken to healing. They set the wedding date for 6 weeks out, enough time to plan, but not so long that the anticipation would kill them. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Paolo Calabrese, the exiled uncle of the family Dante had destroyed, resurfaced from Sicily with one goal: revenge. He'd spent months planning, gathering evidence of Dante's operations, preparing to deliver it all to federal prosecutors. But that wasn't enough for Paolo. He wanted Dante to suffer the way his family had suffered. He wanted to take everything: freedom, son, future. Dante's intelligence network intercepted the plan 48 hours before Paolo planned to act. Elena sat in Dante's office while he explained, her heart sinking with each word. He's going to strike during the wedding. Public venue, reduced security for appearances. His mercenaries will extract Marco during the chaos while the feds arrest me. Dante's voice was flat, controlled. He's planned it perfectly. So we cancel the wedding? No. Dante's eyes were hard. We use it. We set a trap. Let him think he's winning. Then we take him down. Elena's stomach twisted. You want to use our wedding as bait? I want to end this, once and for all. Dante moved around the desk, taking her hands. I won't let him hurt you or Marco. I'll have my best men positioned everywhere. The moment his people move, we'll be ready. And if something goes wrong? It won't. I promise you, Elena. I will keep you safe. Elena wanted to believe him, but she'd seen how quickly things could go wrong, how violence could erupt in seconds. She thought about Marco, about putting him in danger again, and her chest tightened. What does Marco know? Nothing. He'll be with Rosa at a secure location during the ceremony. He won't be anywhere near the danger. That helped, but not enough. Elena pulled her hands free, pacing. This is insane. We're talking about a wedding, Dante, our wedding, and you want to turn it into a war zone. I want to give us a future without this threat hanging over us. Dante's voice was intense. Paolo won't stop. Even if we postpone, even if we hide, he'll keep coming. This is our chance to end it. Elena stopped pacing, looking at him. Really looking. She saw the determination in his eyes, the fear he was trying to hide, the desperate need to protect his family. She saw the man who'd cried when his son spoke, who'd held her through nightmares, who'd given her a reason to live again. Okay, she said quietly, we do it your way. But I'm not hiding. If there's going to be a fight, I'm part of it. Dante started to protest, but Elena cut him off. I'm not a damsel in distress. I'm a woman who took a bullet for your son. I can handle myself. You'll wear a vest under your dress. Obviously. And you'll follow my men's instructions exactly. Yes. And if things go wrong, you run. You don't try to be a hero. Elena moved close, taking his face in her hands. If things go wrong, I protect our family. Just like you. That's non-negotiable. Dante's expression cracked and he pulled her into his arms. You're going to give me a heart attack. Better than a bullet. Elena tried to joke, but her voice shook. We're going to be okay, right? All of us? Yes, Dante said fiercely. I swear to you, Elena, we're going to be okay. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. The wedding planning continued publicly. Flowers, catering, guest list, while privately Dante's men mapped every inch of the venue, planned every contingency, prepared for war. Elena went through the motions, smiling for the dress fittings, tasting cake samples, all while wearing a bulletproof vest and knowing armed guards were stationed at every exit. Marco sensed something was wrong. His anxiety spiked, his meltdowns returned, and Elena spent hours comforting him, promising everything would be okay while not knowing if she was lying. The night before the wedding, she tucked him into bed, singing the Croatian lullaby until he fell asleep. I love you, baby, she whispered, kissing his forehead. No matter what happens tomorrow, remember that. Mama loves you so much. She found Dante in their bedroom, staring out the window at the grounds. Elena wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressing her face to his back. "Second thoughts?" she asked. "About marrying you?" "Never." Dante turned, pulling her close. "About putting you in danger?" "Every second." "Too late to back out now?" "Elena, I mean it. We're doing this. Together." She looked up at him, trying to memorize his face. "Tomorrow, we get married. We trap Paolo. We end this threat. And then we live our lives without looking over our shoulders. You make it sound simple." "It is simple. We fight for our family. That's all that matters." Dante kissed her then, deep and desperate, and Elena kissed back with equal intensity. They made love that night with a fierce tenderness, both of them aware it might be the last time, neither willing to voice that fear. Afterward, they lay tangled together, and Elena listened to Dante's heartbeat, steady and strong. "Ti amo," he whispered into her hair. "Con tutto il mio cuore." "I love you too, with everything I am." They didn't sleep much that night. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. Elena dressed in her room with Rosa's help, the older woman fussing over every detail while tears streamed down her face. The dress was simple but elegant, white silk that flowed like water, with a high neckline that hid the bulletproof vest underneath. Elena's shoulders still ached sometimes, a reminder of what she'd survived, what she was willing to survive again. Marco appeared in the doorway, wearing a tiny suit that made Elena's heart clench. He'd been practicing his role as ring-bearer for weeks, taking it seriously, and now he signed "Mama Beautiful" with such earnest intensity that Elena started crying. "Don't cry, Mama," Marco said, his words clear. "Happy day." "Happy day," Elena agreed, kneeling to hug him. "I love you so much, sweetheart." "Love you too." Marco pulled back, his expression serious. "Papa said stay with Rosa. Be safe." Elena's throat closed. Marco knew something was wrong, even if he didn't understand what. "Yes, baby. You stay with Rosa. No matter what happens, you stay with her. Promise me." "Promise." Marco hugged her again. Then Rosa took his hand, leading him away to the secure location. Elena watched them go, praying it wasn't the last time she'd see her son. The ceremony was held in the estate's chapel, a small, beautiful space that seated 50 guests. Dante's most trusted men were positioned throughout, dressed in suits but armed. Elena could see the bulges of their weapons, the way their eyes constantly scanned for threats. The guests were carefully vetted, but Paolo's mercenaries could be anyone. Elena walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, no family except the one she'd chosen. Dante waited at the altar, devastating in a black suit, his eyes locked on hers. She could see the fear in them, the love, the determination. When she reached him, he took her hands, and Elena felt the tremor in his grip. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about love and commitment, about choosing each other every day. Elena barely heard the words. She was too focused on Dante's face, on memorizing this moment, on the way his thumb stroked her hand. They exchanged vows, Dante's voice breaking on "Till death do us part," and Elena's eyes filled with tears. They were about to exchange rings when the first flashbang went off. The world exploded into chaos. 4 men in tactical gear burst through the chapel doors, weapons raised. Dante's men reacted instantly, returning fire, and Elena found herself shoved behind Dante's body as bullets flew. The guests screamed, diving for cover, and Elena's ears rang from the explosions. But this was the trap. This was what they'd planned for. Dante's men had the advantage of position, of preparation, and within minutes, 3 of the 4 mercenaries were down. The 4th tried to run, but Dante's lieutenant tackled him, zip-tying his hands. "Clear!" someone shouted, and the gunfire stopped. Elena's heart hammered. She looked around the chapel. Several guests were injured, nothing life-threatening, and Dante's men were already administering first aid. Dante turned to her, checking her for injuries, his hands shaking. Are you hurt? Elena, talk to me. I'm fine. I'm okay. Elena gripped his arms. Is it over? Before Dante could answer, his phone rang. He answered, his expression darkening with each word. When he hung up, he looked at Elena with grim satisfaction. Paolo is in custody. My men grabbed him trying to flee the property. It's over. Elena's knees went weak. Dante caught her, holding her up, and Elena buried her face in his chest. Around them, the chapel was a disaster. Bullet holes in the walls, broken glass, the acrid smell of gunpowder. Their wedding had become a battlefield. But they were alive. They'd survived. We should finish, Elena said, pulling back to look at Dante. The ceremony. We should finish it. Dante stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Elena, we were just attacked. And we won. We survived. So let's finish what we started. Elena turned to the officiant who was hiding behind the altar. Can we continue? The officiant stood shakily, nodded. The remaining guests emerged from cover, and Dante's men took positions at the doors. It was insane. It was perfect. Elena took Dante's hands again, and this time when they exchanged rings, when they said, I do, when Dante kissed her with desperate relief, it felt earned. They were married. In blood and bullets and chaos, they were married. The reception was canceled, obviously, but Elena didn't care. They returned to the main house where Rosa had kept Marco safe and oblivious in the secure room. When he saw them, still in their wedding clothes, he ran to them with a huge smile. Mama and Papa married, he announced, and Elena laughed through her tears. Yes, baby, we're married. That night, after Marco was asleep, after the adrenaline had faded and the reality of what they'd survived set in, Elena and Dante completed their vows in the hospital chapel. Just the two of them, no guests, no weapons, no threats. They said their vows again, slower this time, meaning every word. And when Dante kissed her, when he whispered, my wife, against her lips, Elena felt something settle in her chest. They'd survived. They'd won. And now, finally, they could start their life together. Paolo Calabrese was arrested on multiple charges: attempted murder, conspiracy, weapons trafficking. His testimony, coerced by federal prosecutors desperate for a win, implicated only Calabrese operations. Dante's lawyers ensured he remained untouched, his legitimate businesses providing perfect cover. The FBI investigation collapsed, and Agent Torres was reassigned. 2 weeks after the wedding, they held a private ceremony, just family. Rosa, Dante's most trusted man, Marco's therapist. They exchanged vows again in the garden where Elena and Marco had first bonded, and this time there were no bullets, no threats, just love. Marco was the ring bearer again, taking his role seriously. He walked down the makeshift aisle with careful steps, carrying the rings on a pillow, and when he reached his parents, he signed, Family Forever. Elena and Dante both cried. The vows were simple. Dante promised to love Elena through darkness and light, to protect their family, to be the man she deserved. Elena promised to stand beside him, to love Marco as her own, to never give up on them. When they kissed, Marco cheered and everyone laughed. That night, as they lay in bed as husband and wife, Elena reflected on how far they'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been a janitor drowning in debt, invisible and alone. Now she was a mother, a wife, part of a family that was unconventional but undeniably theirs. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm happy. Despite everything, the violence, the danger, the chaos, I'm happy." "Me too." Dante pulled her closer. "You saved us, you know, Marco and me. We were drowning, and you pulled us out." "We saved each other," Elena corrected. "That's what family does." Months passed in peaceful routine. Marco's progress continued. He now attended a specialized school, had several friends, and his vocabulary expanded daily. He still had challenges, still had meltdowns sometimes, but they were manageable. He was healing. Dante transitioned his operations, moving away from the illegal enterprises that had defined his father's empire. It took time, careful maneuvering, but he was determined to give Marco a legacy he could be proud of. He invested in real estate, in legitimate businesses, in building something clean. Elena established a foundation for autism awareness using her story, carefully edited, to help other families. She testified before Congress about the importance of intervention protocols in schools, about training for staff, about support for families. Marco sat beside her during the testimony, and when she mentioned how a janitor's intervention had saved his life, he squeezed her hand. Marco's Law passed 6 months later, requiring autism training for all school staff nationwide. Elena cried when she heard the news, overwhelmed by the impact they'd made. Thousands of children would be helped because of what had happened in that stairwell. 2 years after their wedding, Elena and Dante had a daughter. Sophia was born healthy and loud, with Dante's dark eyes and Elena's stubborn chin. Marco was fascinated by his baby sister, signing gentle to himself as he carefully touched her tiny hand. He took his role as big brother seriously, always making sure Sophia was safe, always wanting to help. Watching Marco with Sophia, Elena saw how far he'd come. The traumatized, nonverbal boy from the stairwell was now a confident 10-year-old who loved his family fiercely. He still faced challenges. Autism didn't disappear, but he'd learned to navigate them. He had tools, support, and most importantly, love. 3 years after that, Elena stood in the garden, watching her family. Marco was 13 now, tall and gangly, explaining marine biology to Sophia with passionate intensity. Dante was teaching Sophia to kick a soccer ball, his patience infinite. Rosa was bringing lemonade, calling everyone to the patio. Elena thought about the day she'd swung that mop bucket, the moment that had changed everything. She'd been trying to save a child. She'd ended up saving herself. "Mama," Marco called, waving her over. "Come see what I found." Elena walked to her son, her husband, her daughter, her family. She'd given up invisibility for this, for chaos and love and belonging. She'd traded safety for purpose, and she'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because some families were born, others were forged in fire, and theirs, built on violence and healing, on trauma and hope, on a janitor's courage and a father's desperate love, was both. Marco showed her a starfish, explaining its regenerative properties with the focused intensity he brought to everything he loved. Sophia tugged on Elena's hand, demanding attention. Dante wrapped his arm around Elena's waist, pulling her close, and Elena leaned into him, breathing in this moment. 5 years ago, she'd been drowning in debt and loneliness. Now she was surrounded by love, by family, by purpose. The journey had been brutal, bullets and blood and trauma that still woke her sometimes in the night. But looking at Marco's smile, at Sophia's joy, at Dante's peace, Elena knew every scar had been worth it. "I love you," Dante murmured against her temple. "I love you too," Elena whispered back. Marco looked up from his starfish, his expression serious. "Mama, I want to tell you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" Marco's hands moved, signing first, then speaking carefully. "Before you, I was lost. Couldn't talk, couldn't trust. You found me in that stairwell. You stayed when everyone else left. You loved me when I couldn't speak." His voice cracked. "Now I can say it. I love you, Mama. You saved me." Elena's vision blurred. She pulled Marco into her arms, this boy who'd become her son, and held him while her heart shattered and reformed. "I love you too, baby. So much." Dante joined the embrace, then Sophia wormed her way in, and they stood there. a tangle of arms and love and gratitude, while the sun set over the garden. Rosa watched from the patio, wiping her eyes. The guards at the perimeter smiled. Elena thought about her brother, about how no one had saved him. She thought about the janitor she'd been, invisible and powerless. She thought about the woman she'd become. A mother, a wife, a fighter. She thought about how a single choice, a single moment of courage had rewritten 3 lives. The world had called their story speechless, called it shocking, called it impossible. Elena called it love. Some families were born, others were forged in fire. Theirs was both, and it was beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional tales. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances and the power of family. Drop a comment telling me which moment made you cry. I read every single one. Thank you for being here, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is love someone when the world tells us not to.